The street was calm and narrow, with houses standing quietly side by side. Most people on the street followed the same routine every day. They woke up early, went to work, came home, and closed their doors. Neighbors knew each other by face but not by heart. Smiles were short, and conversations were rare. One morning, a moving truck stopped near the blue house at the corner. The house had been empty for a long time. Curtains had stayed closed, and the yard had grown wild. When the truck arrived, many neighbors looked through their windows. They were curious but careful. A black family stepped out of the truck. The father, Daniel, looked strong but gentle. He moved with purpose and calm. The mother, Ruth, had warm eyes and a steady smile. Their son, Noah, was 12 years old and quiet. Their daughter, Lena, was 8 and full of energy. They looked tired but hopeful. Daniel opened the truck and began unloading boxes. Ruth thanked the driver and guided the children inside the house. The family worked together without complaint. They laughed softly and helped each other. It was clear they were close. Across the street, a man named Mark stood behind his window. He was in his late 50s and lived alone. He had lived on the street longer than anyone else. He believed the street belonged to people like him. When he saw the family, his face hardened. He did not smile. He felt anger rise without reason. As the day passed, some neighbors nodded politely. One older woman waved. A young man helped Daniel carry a box. But Mark stayed behind his window. He watched every move. In his mind, he made unfair judgments. He told himself the family did not belong there. That evening, Daniel walked the street to introduce himself. He believed in respect and kindness. He knocked on doors and offered a smile. Most people responded kindly. When he reached Mark's house, he knocked gently. Mark opened the door only a little. Daniel introduced himself and welcomed Mark to stop by any time. Mark stared at him with cold eyes. He did not offer his name. He did not shake hands. He said he was busy and closed the door. Daniel stood there for a moment, then walked away calmly. Inside the blue house, Ruth noticed Daniel's quiet mood. He told her what happened. Ruth listened and nodded. She had seen this before in other places. She reminded Daniel to stay patient and focused on their family. The next few weeks were busy. Daniel repaired the fence and cleaned the yard. Ruth planted flowers and painted the front steps. The children started school and tried to make friends. Slowly, the house began to feel like home. But Mark was watching closely. He began calling local offices. He complained about noise, even when the house was quiet. He complained about the fence, even after it was fixed. He complained about the yard, even though it was clean. Inspectors came to the blue house. Daniel welcomed them politely. He answered questions and showed papers. Each time, the inspectors found nothing wrong. They apologized and left. Daniel stayed calm, but the visits worried him. One afternoon, Noah came home upset. A boy at school had said mean things about where he lived. Noah did not understand why people treated them this way. Ruth hugged him and told him to be strong. She told him that their worth did not come from others' opinions. Lena stopped playing outside as much. She felt eyes on her when she rode her bike. She stayed close to the house and held her mother's hand more often. One night, Daniel received a letter. It said the house was under review for serious issues. The letter warned that the family could lose the home if problems were not fixed quickly. Daniel read the letter twice. His hands shook slightly. He knew the claims were false, but he also knew the system could be slow and unfair. Ruth read the letter silently. She looked at Daniel with concern but not fear. She reminded him of their past struggles. They had faced worse and survived. Still, the weight of the letter filled the room. Across the street, Mark sat at his table, drinking coffee. He felt pleased. He believed his actions were working. He believed he was protecting his street. He did not feel guilt. He felt power. What Mark did not know was the truth behind the blue house. He did not know that Daniel had once served his country with honor. He did not know that Ruth had helped rebuild lives after disasters. He did not know that the family had chosen this quiet street to finally rest after years of sacrifice. The family gathered for dinner that night. The food was simple. The mood was quiet but loving. Daniel looked at his children and felt strength return. He promised himself that he would protect his family and their home. Outside, the street looked peaceful. Inside the blue house, courage was growing. And across the street, Mark sat unaware that his actions were about to lead him toward a truth he could not escape. Morning came quietly to the blue house, but the peace felt thin. Daniel woke up early and sat at the small table near the window. He held the letter again and read it slowly. Each line felt heavy. Ruth made tea and placed a cup beside him. She did not rush him. She knew silence sometimes helped more than words. Outside, Mark was already awake. He stood near his window, watching the blue house like always. He noticed Daniel sitting still. That made him feel proud. In his mind, he believed fear was growing inside that home. Daniel decided not to wait. He believed problems grew worse when ignored. After breakfast, he called a lawyer a friend had once recommended. The lawyer listened carefully and asked for documents. Daniel explained every visit and every letter. The lawyer said the situation looked wrong and promised to look deeper. Ruth spent the day organizing papers. She kept records of repairs, inspections, and payments. She was calm and focused. This was not the first time life tested her patience. The children went to school quietly. Noah tried to focus on his lessons, but his thoughts drifted. He worried about the house and his parents. Lena stayed close to her teacher and avoided attention. Both children felt the tension even when no one spoke about it. That afternoon, another inspector arrived. This time he stayed longer. He walked around the house slowly and took notes. Daniel followed him respectfully. Ruth watched from the porch. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Whispers moved from house to house. Across the street, Mark watched with a satisfied smile. He felt powerful seeing officials near the blue house again. He believed the family would soon leave. The inspector finished and spoke privately with Daniel. He said the report came from repeated complaints. He admitted the house seemed fine but said the process had to continue. Daniel thanked him politely. When the inspector left, Daniel felt tired but determined. That evening, Ruth suggested they visit the community center. She believed being visible and open mattered. Daniel agreed. They took the children and walked together. Some neighbors noticed. A few waved. Others looked surprised. At the center, a small meeting was taking place about neighborhood issues. Daniel listened quietly at first. When the topic turned to safety and fairness, he stood up. He spoke calmly and clearly. He talked about respect, rules, and truth. He did not accuse anyone. He only spoke facts. People listened. Some nodded. A few asked questions. Daniel answered honestly. Ruth stood beside him with quiet strength. The children watched their parents with pride. Among the crowd was an older man named Samuel. He recognized Daniel's voice and face. After the meeting, Samuel approached him. He looked closely and smiled with recognition. He asked Daniel about his past work. Daniel hesitated, then answered simply. Samuel's eyes widened. He shook Daniel's hand firmly. He said Daniel had once helped protect his town years ago. He spoke with respect and gratitude. Others nearby overheard the conversation. Whispers spread, but this time they sounded different. Curious. Respectful. Across the room, someone mentioned Daniel's name to Mark's friend, who later told Mark. Mark laughed it off. He said it meant nothing. But a small seed of doubt formed in his mind. Back at home, Daniel told Ruth about Samuel. Ruth smiled softly. She knew their past could not stay hidden forever. She also knew truth had power. The next day, a letter arrived for Mark. It asked him to attend a meeting regarding repeated complaints. Mark felt annoyed. He believed he had done nothing wrong. He planned to defend himself easily. At the same time, Daniel received a call from the lawyer. The lawyer said the complaints all traced back to one source. The lawyer said there might be consequences for false reports. Daniel listened quietly. He thanked the lawyer and ended the call. That night, Daniel and Ruth sat together after the children slept. They spoke about their past openly. They remembered hard days and long nights. They remembered helping others without seeking praise. They agreed they would not hide anymore. Outside, Mark sat alone with his thoughts. For the first time, he felt uneasy. He wondered why the family did not act afraid. He wondered why officials still spoke politely to them. He wondered why his actions had not brought quick results. He told himself he was still in control. But deep down, he felt something shifting. The street remained quiet, but under the calm surface, change was beginning. Truth was slowly rising. And Mark was about to learn that the family he tried to push away carried a strength he never expected. The next few days felt different on the street. The air was the same, the houses were the same, but people were watching with new eyes. Small changes began to appear in quiet ways. Neighbors who once stayed inside now stood outside longer. Some nodded at Daniel with respect. Some smiled at Ruth. The blue house no longer felt invisible. Daniel continued his routine. He went to work, fixed small things at home, and spent time with his family. He did not act proud or loud. He stayed calm. Ruth kept records and answered calls from the lawyer. She spoke clearly and confidently. The children slowly began to feel safe again. At school, Noah noticed a change. A teacher asked him about his father's work. The teacher spoke kindly and listened closely. A few classmates asked questions too. Noah felt nervous at first, then proud. He spoke honestly and simply. Lena drew pictures again and showed them to her friends. Across the street, Mark felt the change and did not like it. He saw neighbors wave at the family. He heard quiet conversations stop when he walked by. He felt eyes on him now. This made him angry and uneasy at the same time. Mark attended the meeting he had been asked to join. It was held at a small office downtown. Two officials sat across from him. They asked about the repeated complaints. They asked why the reports were sent so often. Mark answered sharply. He said he was protecting his street. He said he only wanted rules followed. The officials listened carefully. They showed him documents. They showed him dates and times. They showed him patterns. They explained that false reports caused harm and wasted resources. Mark felt his confidence slip. He argued, but his words sounded weaker. One official said the situation would be reviewed fully. Mark left the meeting with stiff shoulders and a tight jaw. For the first time, he felt unsure. Meanwhile, Daniel received good news. The lawyer said the case was moving quickly. Evidence showed the house met all standards. The lawyer also said the source of the trouble was clear. Daniel thanked him but did not celebrate yet. He believed patience mattered. That evening, a few neighbors stopped by the blue house. One brought baked bread. Another brought fruit. They spoke politely and asked questions. Daniel welcomed them. Ruth offered tea. The conversations were warm and honest. An older woman apologized quietly for staying silent before. She said fear often stopped people from doing what was right. Ruth held her hand and thanked her for coming now. Mark watched all of this from his window. His chest felt tight. He told himself the neighbors were weak. Still, he felt alone in a way he had not before. Later that week, a local paper published a small story about community unity and fairness. It did not name Mark. It spoke about standing against unfair treatment. It mentioned Daniel's past service and Ruth's work helping others. The story spread quickly. People began to talk openly. The blue house became a symbol of strength and patience. Daniel did not seek attention, but it followed him anyway. Mark felt exposed even without his name being mentioned. He avoided eye contact. He stayed inside more often. His anger slowly mixed with fear. One afternoon, Mark noticed damage near the blue house fence. A broken section leaned slightly. It was small and could be fixed easily. But Mark felt panic rise. He worried someone would blame him. He worried eyes were already watching. Daniel saw the damage too. Instead of reacting, he fixed it calmly. He did not accuse anyone. A neighbor helped him. They spoke quietly and finished quickly. This moment confused Mark. He had expected anger or conflict. Instead, he saw patience again. That night, Mark sat alone at his table. He remembered past choices. He remembered times when he could have acted differently. He pushed the thoughts away, but they returned stronger. At the same time, Daniel sat with his children and told them a story about courage. He spoke about standing firm without hate. The children listened closely. They felt safe again. The street slept quietly under the night sky. But deep inside Mark, a storm was growing. His past actions were no longer hidden. The truth was spreading faster than he could control. And soon, Mark would face a moment where he could no longer look away from what he had done. The day began with heavy clouds over the street. The air felt tight, as if something important was waiting to happen. Daniel sensed it the moment he stepped outside. He paused for a second, then continued walking toward his car. He believed that facing the day calmly was always the right choice. Across the street, Mark watched him. Mark had barely slept the night before. His mind kept returning to the meeting, the paper story, the way neighbors looked at him now. 4 years, he had believed he was right. Now that belief felt weak and thin. Later that morning, a letter arrived for Mark. It came from the local office. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. The letter explained that the investigation was complete. It said the repeated complaints were proven false. It said there would be consequences. It also said a meeting would be held on the street with officials and neighbors present. Mark felt his chest tighten. He sat down slowly. For the first time, he felt the full weight of what he had done. That afternoon, 2 officials arrived on the street. A few neighbors gathered outside, curious and quiet. Daniel and Ruth stood together near the blue house. The children stayed close to them. Daniel held Ruth's hand gently. Mark stepped outside his house slowly. Every step felt heavy. He felt eyes on him from every direction. He wanted to turn back, but he knew he could not. One official spoke calmly and clearly. He explained the findings. He explained how false complaints caused harm and fear. He spoke about responsibility and truth. He did not raise his voice. His calm made the words stronger. The official then asked Mark to speak. Mark opened his mouth, but no words came at first. His throat felt dry. He looked around and saw neighbors he had known for years. He saw disappointment in their faces. He saw questions. He saw distance. Finally, Mark spoke. His voice was rough and low. He said he believed he was protecting the street. He said he felt afraid of change. He admitted he made judgments without knowing the truth. His words came slowly, one by one. The official listened. When Mark finished, the official explained the consequences. Mark would face penalties. He would also be required to make things right where possible. The official said fairness worked both ways. The crowd stayed quiet. No one shouted. No one mocked. The silence itself felt powerful. Then Daniel stepped forward. Everyone turned to him. Mark looked up and met Daniel's eyes. He expected anger. He expected blame. Daniel spoke calmly. He said his family came to the street looking for peace. He said they believed in respect and fairness. He said they followed the rules and stayed patient even when it was hard. He said he hoped the street could move forward together. His words were simple, but they carried weight. Ruth stood beside him, steady and proud. She looked at Mark with firm but calm eyes. She did not speak, but her presence said enough. Mark felt something break inside him. For years, he had built walls made of fear and false ideas. Those walls were cracking now. He lowered his head. After the officials left, neighbors slowly returned to their homes. Some paused to speak with Daniel and Ruth. Some offered quiet support. The children relaxed and smiled for the first time in days. Mark stayed where he was for a long moment. Then he walked across the street slowly. Each step felt harder than the last. When he reached Daniel, he stopped. He spoke softly. He said he was wrong. He said he caused harm. He said he did not know how to fix everything, but he wanted to try. Daniel listened. He did not interrupt. When Mark finished, Daniel nodded. He said change began with truth. He said healing took time. Mark nodded in return. He did not expect forgiveness. He only hoped for a chance to do better. That evening, the street felt quieter but lighter. The clouds slowly moved away. Daniel and Ruth sat with their children and shared a simple meal. They talked about strength and kindness. The children felt safe again. Across the street, Mark sat alone in his house. The silence felt different now. It was not full of anger. It was full of reflection. The street had witnessed something important. Truth had been spoken. Masks had fallen. And while wounds remained, the path forward was clear. The street woke up slowly the next morning. Sunlight touched the houses softly, as if the night had washed away something heavy. Birds returned to the trees, and the air felt lighter. People stepped outside with a different feeling in their hearts. Daniel stood on the porch of the blue house and took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, his chest did not feel tight. Ruth joined him with 2 cups of tea. They stood together quietly and watched the street come alive. The children felt the change too. Noah walked to school with more confidence. He lifted his head and greeted people along the way. Lena rode her bike again, this time laughing freely. The street no longer felt like a place of fear. Across the road, Mark opened his door and stepped outside. He moved slower than usual. His shoulders were lower, and his eyes looked tired but clear. He stood for a moment, unsure where to go or what to do. Mark knew words alone would not fix what he had done. He knew trust was not something that returned quickly. He decided to start with action. That afternoon, Mark picked up tools and walked toward the blue house. Daniel noticed him and stayed calm. Mark stopped near the fence and spoke carefully. He asked if he could help with repairs or yard work. His voice was quiet and honest. Daniel looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded. He handed Mark a pair of gloves and pointed to the garden area. They worked side by side in silence at first. The sound of tools and moving soil filled the space between them. Slowly, words returned. Mark apologized again, not loudly, but sincerely. He spoke about fear and loneliness. He spoke about how anger had blinded him. Daniel listened and did not judge. He spoke about patience and choice. He said everyone had a chance to change. Ruth brought water for both men. She thanked Mark for helping. Her words were simple but meaningful. Mark felt a weight lift from his chest. Neighbors noticed. One by one, they stopped to watch. Some joined in. Someone brought snacks. Another helped clean the sidewalk. What started as a small moment turned into a shared effort. The street began to change. People talked more. They listened more. They learned each other's names and stories. The Blue House became a place of welcome instead of tension. A few weeks later, the community center held a gathering. It was meant to celebrate unity and growth. Daniel was asked to speak. He hesitated but agreed. He stood in front of neighbors and spoke from the heart. He spoke about respect and courage. He spoke about standing firm without hatred. He said true strength came from fairness and kindness. Ruth was asked to speak too. She talked about healing and patience. She reminded everyone that silence could cause harm, but speaking together could bring change. Mark stood in the crowd and listened. He felt shame for the past but also hope for the future. After the speeches, he stepped forward and thanked the family publicly. He said their strength showed him a better way to live. The children watched with wide eyes. They saw adults grow and change. They learned that even painful moments could lead to something better. Months passed. The street became warmer and more connected. New families felt welcome. Old neighbors felt proud. Problems were discussed openly instead of whispered. Daniel and Ruth finally felt at home. The house that once felt threatened now felt strong. The walls held not fear but memories of courage and unity. Mark continued to work on himself. He helped neighbors, joined meetings, and listened more than he spoke. He knew he could never erase the past, but he could shape the future. One evening, as the sun set, the families gathered outside. Children played, adults laughed, and stories were shared. The street felt alive in a way it never had before. Daniel looked around and felt grateful. Ruth held his hand and smiled. They had come looking for peace, and through patience and truth, they had found it. The blue house stood strong, not just as a home, but as a reminder. A reminder that truth rises, kindness heals, and real strength is shown through fairness and change. The street rested under the quiet sky, transformed not by force, but by courage, honesty, and the choice to do better.